It's a year of history already. 46 days between Operation Sindoor and Operation Midnight Hammer. Air power history has already been made in just barely 6 months of this year. The man responsible for the latest, of course, is the man that I want to put my spotlight on today. The man, of course, is the President of the United States of America. Donald Trump is having his latest meltdown today, and not because of what he did, but because the world didn't behave the way he wanted it to. Not for the first time this year, by the way. Specifically this time, Iran and Israel. Just hours ago, live on television, he thundered about a ceasefire between Israel and Iran, declared the war was over, peace had prevailed, and then, right on cue, as if defying him, Iran fired missiles and Israel fired right back. It's almost like the most powerful man in the world was not so powerful after all. And Trump, visibly rattled, did something no U.S. president has done in decades. He publicly scolded Israel and lumped it with Iran in a war of blame. He even dropped the 4-letter word on camera while describing the two countries. Believe it or not, listen in.
You know what? We basically have two countries that have been fighting so long and so hard that they don't know what the they're doing. Do you understand that?
But this isn't a one-off. Just weeks ago, after he floated a so-called Russia-Ukraine peace formula, Zelensky's special forces launched one of their deepest drone strikes inside Russia. Remember that? And let's not forget the time Trump tried to take credit for the India-Pakistan ceasefire. He did it just a couple of days ago again. That too was a fiction that he's trying to control and own for himself because it makes him look good. What we're seeing here perhaps isn't necessarily a man of peace, strictly speaking. It's a man chasing a peace prize. That's the through line. Not strategy, not consistency, just one shiny medal he didn't get the last time. Everything else appears for now to be a contradiction. Trump orders the most audacious stealth bombing mission in decades, Operation Midnight Hammer, cripples Iran's nuclear capacity in minutes, and then walks out on stage trying to look like Mahatma Gandhi in a navy blue suit. The bomber and the pacifist rolled into one photo opportunity. Well, here's the truth, because the world is much more complicated than Trump's world. The world's wars aren't listening to Trump. Not Iran, not Israel, not Russia, not India. Maybe the only one obeying right now is Pakistan, and that's because it doesn't really have a choice, does it? But that apart, the only one still buying the idea of Trump, the global peacemaker, is perhaps Donald Trump himself. And that Nobel Peace Prize, if Pakistan somehow manages to take over the Nobel Committee, maybe Trump has a chance. But the question we're asking tonight is a nuanced question, and it is a question not asked with disrespect, but genuine wonder. Is Donald J. Trump a joker or a genius? What are the yardsticks we can use to actually judge him? Well, we've got a few in the last few days, haven't we? Well, let's begin. Is he a joker? For instance, he teased peace, then launched the first stealth bombers over Iran. But is he a genius, rather? Because he executed the most precise B-2 Spirit strike in decades, all in just one night. All it took was just 36 hours. Some would say, is he a joker? He called Pakistan a peace partner right after Operation Sindoor. But then is he a genius? Because he used Pakistan's cooperation to fly bombers into Iranian skies for that audacious attack. Is he a joker? Trump flirts with the Nobel Prize while global tensions are exploding in the most dangerous part of the world. But is he a genius? Because he played the Nobel card maybe to distract and lull his adversaries before ordering Operation Midnight Hammer. Just think about that for a second. Is Trump a joker? He sent decoy B-2 bombers over the Pacific as a media spectacle. Is he a genius? Because the real bombers, the real B-2s, were actually sent eastward, as NDTV reported, to Iran on a 36-hour bombing mission. Do you see the contradiction I'm trying to make? Some would say, is he a joker? Is Trump a joker because he triggers global chaos on a virtually daily basis with questionable diplomatic preparations? But is he a genius? Is Trump a genius because he has rewritten the Middle East strategic map without losing a single American life this time? That is the question that we are asking right now. Joker or genius? He is deeply divisive. He's someone who polarizes everyone. But the question is, what is the future of how the world will see Donald J. Trump? Joining me live now is John Spencer, Executive Director with the Urban Warfare Institute, someone who looks very closely at what's been playing out in the Middle East at this point of time. John, welcome. Thank you very much for your time here on NDTV. My first question to you is on that unsurprisingly viral press conference by the U.S. President, where he dropped a few choice words in his frustration over the fact that despite having announced an end to hostilities, missiles appeared to have still been flying between Iran and Israel. What did you make of that, John?
Shiv, it's good to be back with you. I try not to do politics. From a historical perspective, it is very normal to have these 6-hour, 12-hour ceasefires where planes are recalled, forces are drawn back. We did see Iran launch 6 salvos during supposedly the ceasefire timeline, killing Israeli civilians. President Trump, of course, frustrated by that, as communicating to both. But I will say in this instance, and I look at every conflict very differently. As you know, I'll be on the ground next week in India to continue in studying the amazing Operation Sindoor. In this case, though, it was a single American operation that did fool the world, to include where the B-2s were going, that helped push this conflict to an end, raging for 11 days, massive amounts of strikes against Iranian military sites, having supremacy over Iranian skies, a small country of Israel.
Yes.
And did, after Iran made like we talked about, the mistake of attacking an American base with what seems to be ceremonial saving face, and their thinking, we got to save face, giving an alert, firing 14 missiles, all 14 knocked down, that the president did negotiate a ceasefire. Each one of these countries can act in their own interest, but he was able to mitigate. Both countries have now said that that's going to be the case. Yes, we have to hit the 12-hour mark, and okay, now who's going to be in a violation? But there is some historical parallels here from the Korean War, Bosnian War, Yom Kippur War, where you had this timeline and stuff happens during the timeline.
I want to ask you about, the functioning of military operations in Trump's world. And John, I know you don't, usually comment on politics, so I'm going to keep politics out of this. But Trump did put out a tweet on his Truth Social account saying, Israel, call your pilots back. This is an unusual way of doing things, but we do live in Trump's world. I think most people have gotten used to these new rules of engagement as dictated by the President of the United States. You don't often see the President of the United States ask Israel to call their pilots back in the middle of a live military operation. What did you think of that? It's changed the way things are actually done. Some would say it's brought a level of transparency to what is otherwise something that happens strictly from a situation room or over a hotline. Is that the new normal now?
I mean, it's very special for sure. And you have to admit, even when the vice president was on a news broadcast on Fox Channel, the post about the ceasefire came out. He said he knew about it, but wasn't knowing the timing. There is absolutely some transparency here. You go back to like our President Roosevelt during World War II, he would do nightly fireside chats. President Trump likes to talk directly, and sometimes it's not clear what he's saying, but you have to watch the American actions. Sometimes it's even trolling, as we call it, trolling against others. I do believe that post was genuine, as Israel had just been hit. Civilian site in Beersheba, civilians had died, and their population wanted a response as well. his tweet, Israel dropped one bomb on one radar site, and then right now we think that it's over. So I think that's genuine. Yes, that's President Trump. It's very abnormal. Some people love it. Some people don't like it.
Has Trump, met the military objectives as probably defined by him during this particular operation? We don't have the scope on this particular show, John, to get into, whether damage was done, the scale of the damage. There are media reports saying, not much was damaged, etc. But from Trump's perspective, do you think that the objectives he set out to achieve have been?
Absolutely. I mean, although there's one Trump post about the regime change, it shouldn't be politically incorrect, but I think he was talking about the Iranian people. The United States was very clear, and to be sure, Israel was very clear. This was about the progress towards a nuclear bomb and rolling that program back. And yeah, you're right. We could discuss how much it was rolled back. But from a military perspective for the United States, it was a demonstration of this is a new world, much like in the Prime Minister Modi said. No longer there will be action taken to prevent catastrophes like a terror regime getting a nuclear bomb and resetting the geopolitical landscape. I think that was achieved. The ability for the United States and clearly Israel to strike what it wants when it wants in Iran as well has been achieved. So from a military perspective, for no loss of American life, no loss of American aircraft, zero impact to American installations, but still have a geopolitical and regional impact to set back the Iranian nuclear program and to establish a new doctrine, basically, with it. Very successful from an objective assessment.
John, the U.S. president hasn't made a secret of his his desire perhaps for a Nobel Peace Prize. He recently had lunch with the, Pakistan Army chief who had called for a Nobel Peace Prize for him. He has posted quite regularly on social media, a couple of days ago where he used the word Nobel Peace Prize no less than 4 times. So that is no secret. Do you think that, far from being a non-serious issue, is something that guides Trump's actions and is part of what he's trying to do at this point?
I think President Trump is a complex individual. Of course, he has personal interests, but I think at this point he is fulfilling his mandate, America first, peace through strength, in action. And even with his, what they call his base, there's been arguments against isolationism and America not be involved in anybody's war. I think he has demonstrated historic. I mean, if you go back to when President Obama was given a Nobel Peace Prize in advance of potentially causing peace, what the president has done since his short term so far has been to create peace after decades of Islamic regime terror in the Middle East and racing towards this bomb. I can't say what his individual interests are, but from the American interest, I think he's been very in line with strength, showing strength and trying to create peace. The deals he created with the Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and others in the Gulf states are historic. And now he's off to NATO, where we would all love to see the Ukraine-Russia war come to an end, like to see Europe giving more percentage towards the NATO defense. I think there's some valid assessment, but I won't assess his individual interest now.
Very true, and I actually agree with you on that. Having covered different aspects of West Asia, Libya, Afghanistan, etc., it seems like after many failed, nuanced efforts to do something in the Middle East, here comes a president who's very naked about his views, if I could say that. He's talking openly about what he wants. He's literally commanding Israel via social media. Some would call it transparency. Others would call it a kind of, almost a kind of political purity in terms of what he wants to actually achieve over there. And anything that's out of the box, given the track record of failures to do anything about Middle East crisis, is most certainly welcome. But do you see this time, John, Trump has talked about this ceasefire. He has said, there is an end to hostilities right now. He's made his frustration quite clear in public. Do you think that what has been achieved this time draws a line in the sand, or is there uncertainty about what happens next? Could there be a lasting sort of normalcy for now?
So I posted recently about what is strategy in war, that it is adapted to uncertainty. All war is uncertain. The Islamic regime in Iran can make very, as we've seen them, illogical. Supposedly they're going to do a parade talking about their victories today, like very emblematic of Pakistan's comments after Sindor. I do believe that this will cause a stop in the operations, and this will hold, and that there was historic setback of the Islamic regime's program and interest. This shattered the ideals of invincibility of the Islamic regime in the Middle East. I do think it gives a chance for peace, but nobody can predict whether it will. But the Islamic regime's terror networks, the Houthis, the Hezbollah, Hamas, the Shia-backed groups, even the fall of Syria, has all been unraveled. And now their one crown jewel of trying to get to that nuclear umbrella, very similar to Pakistan, so it can put an umbrella like, well, I have a nuclear weapon, you can't, I want to do these things and there's nothing you can do about it. I think it is historic in that this operation will set the path to peace, but everybody gets to make their own decisions, so you can't say with certainty.
John Spencer, always a pleasure. Thanks so much for your time and being with me here on NDTV. I look forward to meeting you when you're in India here next week. We will, of course, invite you back on the show and talk much more about Operation Midnight Hammer as well as Sindhu. Remember, they were only 46 days apart, and in a moment from now, I'll be telling you about some of the lessons and takeaways and observations for India from what has just happened via those B-2 Spirit bombers. Well, speaking of those bombers, we've got the first official images of the very B-2 bombers that conducted that strike in Iran 3 nights ago. Take a look at these pictures. These are night vision video images officially released by the United States Department of Defense. And I'm going to put the sound up in just a moment so you can actually hear what these aircraft sound like as they roared off the runway towards Iran on a 36-hour flight for a historic bombing mission. In Operation Midnight Hammer, everyone has told you about the B-2 Spirit stealth bombers that led the bombing of those nuclear facilities in Iran. But I'm going to tell you about 5 weapons that were used or deployed that night that no one has reported about in detail so far. The first one of them is called the AGM-88E, Advanced Anti-Radiation Guided Missile. The role this played was preemptive suppression of Iranian air defenses. These missiles were fired that night ahead of the stealth bombers at Iranian air defenses during the B-2 pack entry into Iranian airspace, fired by U.S. fighter aircraft flying in support of the stealth bombers to ensure safety from ground engagement. This mission has been confirmed by U.S. Secretary of Defense, but the weapon was not named. Number 2, the ADM-160, which is a miniature air-launched decoy jammer. The role this played, and we can confirm it was used, decoys fired by U.S. fighter aircraft to mimic fighter radar signatures and basically fool Iranian air defenses and radars, saturate them alongside jamming of ground sensors in Iran. The third weapon that we know was deployed in the air, we don't know if it was used, is the AGM-158B JASSM-ER. The role of this stealth cruise missile was kept as a backup weapon. F-35 fighters, F-22 fighters armed with these but did not need to fire them, we hear, since the main weapons were fired obviously very, very successfully, but those were definitely in the air. This is the AGM-154 Joint Standoff Weapon, or JSOW. The role was, it was a standby glide bomb, possibly to destroy Iranian airbase infrastructure in case fighter jets were scrambled that night. They were not obviously fired since the B-2s did not trigger any Iranian aircraft scramble, and no weapon was fired at the B-2s. Nobody even knew that they were there. And finally, the enigmatic EA-18 Growler. This is an electronic attack aircraft which was in the air producing continuous jamming along the B-2 stealth bomber flight route, sanitizing air corridors, outside Iran, jamming possible or expected airborne intercept radars borne by Iranian fighter aircraft that were expected to scramble and cripple Iranian command and control. Again, these were there as a safety, but they were deemed not necessary at all, obviously because the Spirit and its entire package went completely undetected. Well, barely 6 months of the year have passed, and 2025 is already the year of unprecedented air power. The world has spent 3 days and 2 sleepless nights gawking at how Trump's America has rewritten the doctrine of long-range strike with its terrifying silent bombing of Iran's nuclear facilities. Well, barely a month ago, India, remember, set its own new air power benchmark with the Operation Sindoor airstrikes. Both operations vastly different, but both operations audacious, risky, and in their own ways, almost unbelievable. At one level, in terms of scale, there is no comparing these two missions. But a question I've been asked since these two completely milestone airstrikes are separated by just 46 days is this: what are India's observations, takeaways, and lessons from Trump's midnight hammer? Well, here's what I think. Takeaway number 1, deception is not a tactic, it's an absolute doctrine. The US sent decoy B-2 bombers one way while the real strike aircraft were already in position. The level of misdirection buys survivability and surprise. India has used similar deceptive tactics during the Balakot airstrikes, and this time as well. We must look closer at the doctrine of deception. Takeaway number 2, precision isn't just about bombs, it's about preparation. Every target hit was likely scouted by stealth drones and confirmed by intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance platforms. India needs to integrate drone-based reconnaissance with its strike planning even more than it already has done, and it has done brilliantly during Operation Sindoor. Takeaway number 3, air power needs airspace and access. What the United States did was silent, cynical cooperation coerced from a country like Pakistan, proving that diplomacy obviously shapes war, despite what your allies might think. India doesn't have the same airspace needs for its offensive operations, but the fact that regional air corridors are force multipliers is beyond question and has been taken note of. Takeaway number 4, stealth isn't a luxury. It has not been a luxury for many decades. It's a glaring necessity in today's battlefield, and it was ably demonstrated by the B-2s entering contested skies undetected. Not a single shot was apparently fired at them. While Pakistan will soon be receiving Chinese J-35 stealth fighters, India doesn't yet have stealth jets and are a decade away from our own stealth fighter, the AMCA, becoming a reality. On that front, even though we've got a lot else going on, we are vulnerable unless it changes soon. Takeaway number 5, mid-air refueling tankers are tactical assets of great necessity. A 36-hour mission by the US B-2 bombers wasn't possible without dozens of mid-air refueling tanker aircraft along the way. India must stop treating tankers as an afterthought. We have already had 3 aborted attempts at procuring more tankers and wasted time ignoring this much-needed capability. We've got a few of these aircraft. We desperately need more. Takeaway number 6, the first ever use of the bunker buster GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrator in a live operation was a message in itself. The US used this super powerful bomb to go after hardened strikes like Fordo in Iran. India used a much smaller penetration warhead in Balakot, but ended up in a messy claim war over damage done. Every weapon must send a message. India learnt that very well and executed incredibly well during Operation Sindoor. That's why the pictures are so clear. Takeaway number 7, cruise missiles save pilots. The US didn't just send aircraft to support its B-2 bombers, it launched standoff munitions, Tomahawk cruise missiles from hundreds of kilometers away in the Arabian Sea in a submarine. India's use of the BrahMos and Scalp missiles to target Pakistan was unprecedented, and it affirms that our cruise missile inventory must evolve even more in range and precision. And I'm happy to tell you that is precisely what is happening. Takeaway number 8, every strike must speak for itself. The US didn't just mount a strike on Iran, it sent out a global shockwave. India must improve its ability to narrate the strike, control the optics, and shape global perception. That's right, that word which everyone is uncomfortable about, narrative. Takeaway number 9, the Navy is not a spectator. The U.S. submarines and destroyers were deployed not just for backup. One U.S. submarine fired over 40 Tomahawk cruise missiles at the Isfahan nuclear facility in Iran. The Indian Navy didn't directly mount any attacks on Pakistan during Operation Sindoor, but was fully prepared to. It was primed and ready, and that phase of Operation Sindoor would have been possibly the most devastating. So this is not a lesson, this is not a takeaway, this is an affirmation of how India does things. Takeaway number 10, finally, surprise requires strategy. Midnight Hammer wasn't just an airstrike, it was the end game of a months-long build-up. India must institutionalize long lead planning for short window missions. This becomes even more complex with the new rules of engagement where terror attacks are interpreted and treated as acts of war by Pakistan. These are my 10 takeaways, observations, validations, endorsements for India from Operation Midnight Hammer.